Oi, nerd, what you got there? Books? Dice?
Yup, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got into this situation. Well, it all started one day when I was listening to this show.
There's a place so very far. We can get there as long as it's by stolen car. Special place and go shoot up.
This is the Heavy Metal RPG Podcast with your host, Banjo Destructo.
Welcome to another episode of the Heavy Metal RPG Podcast. I'm your host, Banjo, and I got another icebreaker question for us. What movie do you think is really fun and represents an aspect of DCC RPG? And I think the movie Army of Darkness is an excellent, fun adventure, based off of one of the aspects of that movie that I think I would love to see in Dungeon Crawl Classics is the Necronomicon Ex Mortis. I think the way that book behaves in the movie is how spell books of all types should behave in Dungeon Crawl Classics. I think each magical tome should be either alive or enchanted or have its own personality and should allow for the ritual casting of spells from it by any character. Like Ash Williams, I think he is maybe a warrior, or a warrior thief type character. He's not, a wizard or a cleric. He's, a pretty dumb guy who's cool and kicks ass. But, anyone can open up the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, recite passages from it, and summon demons or cast spells. It's just that there's only some people who actually know what the heck that they're doing before they cast the spells, so they don't unleash holy hell unless they do it on purpose. So, what I try to do is work in the fact that wizards are casting spells not from spellbooks. They're not learning spells from spellbooks. Spellbooks are rare, powerful artifacts that allow anyone to cast spells, but wizards can do it better. Thieves can still do it pretty good. And then everyone else does it just not as good as thieves, wizards, elves, or clerics. Alright, so if you have a movie you want to talk about, go ahead and send an email to heavymetaladventures@protonmail.com. I'm still waiting for an email. I don't know if any filters are blocking it out. Proton Mail's pretty secure and safe with that sort of stuff, but just let me know. I promise I won't bite. I'm real friendly. And because I still haven't received any emails from users, I went ahead and got a question from the DCC forums. Username Bofrat asks about what happens when a thief or halfling character gains luck points at the end of an adventure. And I don't think it's necessarily codified very well. There's a couple ways to interpret what would happen with a thief or a halfling when they gain luck points at the end of an adventure. You could interpret it as them gaining an increase in their maximum luck score, or, the score that their luck regenerates up to when their luck heals, right? Thieves and halflings, they regenerate luck points based on what their level is. They regenerate that many luck points per day. Or you could interpret it as, if they've burned luck points, well, the adventurer just helps them regain their luck back up to their maximum a little bit faster. And that feels, if you're playing a halfling or a thief, which I've done both, that could feel a little disappointing because you're just getting your base class feature, you're not getting something special. But, maybe if you didn't burn any luck during that adventure, your judge could say, yeah, you get your maximum increased like everybody else, But if you did burn some, well, then you don't get increasing your maximum, you just increase it a little bit faster. Me personally, I lean towards the increasing your maximum even if you burned luck points. And, as a house rule, I kind of offer special bonuses for thieves and halflings, because if you let them regenerate or gain their maximum luck at the end of adventures, soon you're gonna probably get them up to 18. And then what do you do after that? Do they go up to 19? Do they go up to 20? Well, you could offer them the ability to burn luck permanently instead of burning luck temporarily like normal. So what do you do when they do that? You can offer them additional bonuses, like maybe you let them burn 2 luck dice if they're a thief. Just an example, right? You can think of something worthwhile to give them as a bonus for burning a permanent point of luck that is better than what they would normally get for burning luck. You could probably introduce the advantage mechanic from 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. If a thief or a halfling burns a permanent point of luck, maybe you give them advantage on the dice roll so that they roll it twice and choose the highest one. Those are just 2 ideas. Maybe you could give a plus dice chain adjustment for the thief, and then let them burn or roll 2 of their luck dice and pick the highest one. I don't know. This is something that you would have to come up with as a player or as a judge to offer as an option, right? It's a house rule situation. And for the halfling, maybe instead of +2, you give them +4 or +5. It's something, better than what they normally get, for the situation where they're burning a permanent point of luck instead of temporary. And then, if you do let them keep increasing their luck past 18, that brings up the situation of what happens when a character's attribute goes over 18. Do they get a bonus greater than +3? What do you do? Now, you can go through the book and maybe look at some of the monster stats and make a guess as to, if your strength is 19, what do you get instead of +3? If your strength is 20, what do you get if your strength is 23? I don't necessarily believe it is set in stone, but maybe it is, and maybe I just missed it. But this is an opportunity for additional house rules, or judging calls for what you could do. Me personally, I think this gives a good opportunity for the unique mechanics of Dungeon Crawl Classics to show how they can be applied to house rule situations. If you take it as a set of rules that, there's only dice score adjustments for your stats being between 3 and 18, instead of it also being codified for 18 and above, then maybe for like a strength of 19 to 22, you could say, we're going to take your +3 bonus and we're going to change it to a +1 dice chain adjustment for strength-based rolls like attacks and, climbing and things like that. Maybe you think it should be like a +1 dice chain and a +2 bonus. Or maybe you think it should be a +1 dice chain and keep the +3 bonus. These are all things that you can consider doing. And then, 23 to 26, maybe it's a +2 dice chain bonus. Or, if you're keeping it a dice chain bonus and like a +1 or +2, maybe you would also have it be a dice chain bonus with a +2 or a +3 on the dice roll. So, or, +2 dice chain and a +1 or +2 bonus. Because when you go from a 20 to a 24, you're giving a D20 +3 is probably a bit stronger than a D24 without any adjustments. So you would want it to feel more powerful. So, going from a D20 with a +3 to a D24 +2, that seems maybe about right for an adjustment. And then but a D24 to a D30 That's
a huge bonus, right? If you're gonna do a +2 dice chain bonus for like strength 23 and higher, you might want to keep it at a lower additional bonus, like dice chain +2 with a +1 or +2 on your strength and attack rolls, kind of a thing. But it's not like you would get strength that high
in very many situations, unless you're reintroducing certain magic items from Dungeons and Dragons, gauntlets of giant strength or gauntlets of titan strength, things like that, which allow your player to have their strength count as a certain amount instead of just giving like a +1 or +2 to their strength. So those are just ideas to consider. I hope I answered your question there, Bofrat. I hope you do listen to the show. If you do, send an email to heavymetaladventures@protonmail.com, and I'd love to hear from you. If anybody else has any questions or answers to these situations, let me know.
Now for the main subject I wanted to talk about on this episode, making customized character classes for your home campaigns of Dungeon Crawl Classics. Now, the game only comes with 7 classes base in the main rulebook: Warrior, Thief, Cleric, Wizard, Elf, Dwarf, and Halfling. Those are kind of the classic standard classes. A lot of them you might consider to be archetypical classes, or main classes, as they might have been called in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. There's a lot of subclasses in AD&D that kind of branch off from them, using them as a base. So if you wanted to use something different, lots of people have blogs or little pamphlets or books with different classes for DCC and DCC-like games. You could even try adding in the classes from Mutant Crawl Classics. There's Star Crawl. What else? Umerica. I hear there's the Gone Farmer's Almanac and a couple other things you could try getting with custom character classes in them. Look around, I'm sure you'll be able to find one, but if you wanted to make one yourself, here's a process that I've kind of laid out for making your own character class. First, if you want to make a class that already exists in Dungeons and Dragons or some other game and convert it to DCC, at least you can use the class that's closest to it as a starting point. So let's look at Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. There's Paladin, Ranger, Barbarian, Assassin, Acrobat, Illusionist, Bard, and those are just in, and Monk too, and those are just in the main rulebook as far as I'm aware. There's also Druid. You could also think about, character races that are in Dungeons and Dragons that you might want to add as a race as class in DCC. So, of course, there's gnomes, half-orcs, there's Thrycrin, half-ogres, there's those half-dwarf, half-human characters from Dark Sun. I think it's called a mole. Half-elf is another one that you could try turning into DCC. So, whatever your concept is, that's what you start off with. And let's just take Paladin as an example. What if you wanted to make your own Paladin class for DCC? Well, in AD&D, Paladin is a subclass of fighter, so you could take Warrior and use that as a template for your Paladin. And, that's the first step I would do. Find a class that exists in the rulebook that's closest to what you want. Use it as a template. Then you take the features or skills that are part of that class and cut them out. So, for example, with our warrior turning into a paladin, I don't think Lucky Weapon would fit in with paladin. We could probably get rid of the extended threat range. And maybe let's keep the deed die as an attack bonus option, but get rid of the Mighty Deeds feature. Alright, now that we've cut away what we want to get rid of from the base class, we can add in the features that we want for the class. In this case, let's say we want our paladin to do like a holy smite against its foes. Well, since we're keeping the deed die for an attack bonus, we can make the deed die on a 3+ activate our holy smite. Then we gotta decide how much damage or extra damage we want our holy smite to do, and you can balance that as you see fit. Maybe you want it to be an extra d6, an extra 2d6. You can make it double your normal damage. You can make it max out whatever damage you want to do. It'd be up to you to decide. Maybe we also want our holy smite to cause fear in the opponents that we're fighting against. So if our holy smite activates, in addition to whatever normal circumstances would cause a morale check in our enemies, the holy smite also causes a morale check. Now you might want to balance that out against how much damage it does. And maybe you might have the damage increase as the paladin levels up, and that would be a good thing to do. And then paladins are also known for kind of having a bit better saving throws than fighters. So instead of having one saving throw category that has the best progression, maybe it has 2 saving throws that are best progression and 1 saving throw that's medium progression, without having a saving throw that is the worst progression. And then because paladins are kind of known for sword fighting and maybe knightly weapons, we instead of being able to use all weapon types, we cut it down so that paladins use swords, spears, lances, javelins. And then maybe you can think of maybe a couple others that might go well with it, but you don't want, maybe you want to cut out your paladin from using axes, bows, and things like that. Just minor things to kind of tweak it out. And then, bada bing, bada boom, you got yourself a paladin class. You just started with a base class in the book, tweaked a couple things, and added some more to add the flavor of the paladin that you wanted it to be. But, there's another way we could have made a paladin. We could have taken the cleric class and we could have cut away the normal spell casting that it does, keep the lay on hands, because maybe we wanted to emphasize the spell casting ability that paladins have in Dungeons and Dragons. And maybe we make the healing a little bit worse. Maybe everybody who's healed by a paladin counts as being opposed alignment, just to keep it simple and a little bit less effective than what it would normally be. And then reduce the function so that it can restore hit points or cure diseases and poisons, but not heal broken limbs and injuries like that. And then you could decide if you want to keep Turn Unholy, or you could modify it to a Smite Unholy spell. And then maybe you give the paladin just maybe one specific cleric spell that you think from the spell list that goes with the paladin, maybe like a spell that gives a bonus to AC, or maybe the bless spell, something like that. So you got your paladin that can cast 3 spells like a cleric. Maybe you keep the disapproval system. You could decide if you want to bump up the hit dice or bump up the attack bonus progression. And then, just like what we did before, you could decide to give it 2 saving throw progressions that are the best and keep 1 at medium. And that would be another way that you can make a paladin using the cleric class instead of the warrior class. And there's other ways you can make the paladin class as well. It'd kind of be up to you to decide what emphasis you wanted to have the paladin be. Part of what the DCC classes do is you don't want to have your classes have too many features to keep track of. Warriors basically have lucky weapon and the deed die, and that's it for the features. The deed die gets better every level, but its function doesn't really change. So you don't want to keep tacking on lots and lots of different things that make it harder to balance. 1 or 2 things might be what you would want to do. That would at least be my approach. So that's it for the basic steps, right? You pick your base character class, you decide what part of it is similar to the class you want to make, strip out the features from the base class that don't match what you're trying to do, tack on features that make the class do what you want it to do, but keep it simple enough that it's not too cluttered, and make each feature increase in function as you level up instead of adding more complexity to it. So that's it. That was the paladin.
What if we wanted to add a gnome? A gnome as a racist class to the game. We can look at the 3 racist classes that are already in the game and kind of think about what it is about them that makes them special, and how we can make our gnome. Well, you might say that a gnome illusionist is probably one of the most classic examples from Dungeons & Dragons. So, we might think, alright, we want gnomes to be able to cast spells. The elf class is kind of like that. The elf is almost a little bit like a mix of a warrior and a wizard. Dwarf is kind of like a warrior with a little bit extra. And halfling is a little bit like a warrior with extra thief features. So we've already got warrior wizard, warrior thief, and warrior. One combination we're missing would be thief wizard. Another might be thief cleric. You might think warrior cleric, or even cleric wizard. So those are different combinations of the main classes we could do. But for the gnome, we might want to think about thief wizard as that combination. So we could give the gnome something similar to the hiding in shadows and sneaking around. So that would be easy to do. We could give the gnome that single skill. We could give the gnome a relatively good attack progression bonus that starts off pretty good at level 1. Maybe we could do something similar to the elf progression for the gnome for attack bonuses. Maybe we could take the saving throws from the elf and swap 2 of them to make it a little bit more appropriate for the gnome. We could give the gnome the HP progression of the halfling, if we think that that's appropriate. And then we could give the gnome access to spells that match what we would think the illusionist would do. And that would be the trickiest part. there aren't that many spells in DCC as D&D to pull from. We could take a look at the spell lists that exist in D&D, try to match them up with DCC spells that are roughly equivalent, but you would probably have to come up with a few spells of your own. And that would be the hardest thing to balance about a gnome, thief, wizard type class. Now, illusionists kind of have maybe more spells per day with restricted access to a total range of spells. So that might inform us on what to do for their spell tables. In DCC, if you roll low enough, you forget the spell for the rest of the day. Maybe we add a category for the gnome spells where if they cast it, it can fail without it being a loss, so that they can at least try to cast spells a little more often without forgetting them. And maybe you make it so they don't have access to spell burn, so that they would rely a little bit more on combat or something like that if their spells fail or they run out of spells. And then, giving them access to weapons, and you just think about what a gnome might use. Maybe you give them the halfling weapons with a few more options. I don't know. That probably doesn't matter too much. But, with a little work, with about 3 or 4 different spells added to the game, you could make your gnome class.
So what if we want to do like another class? So yeah, that's the topic, right? Take your idea for a class, see what base class that exists in DCC fits it, strip away the features that don't work, modify some of the features that exist to fit better with what you want, and add features that don't exist with the class already to get what you do want. Alrighty, well, thank you for listening. I'll be back next time. Let's head on out to the Metal lands where everybody rolls dice. Take care.
Filthy hair and dirty faces, iron fiends and swords and maces. 80s hairbands are still hated, no prospect of tolerated.
It's all over, man. It's all over. They destroyed it. They destroyed it all.
Yeah, looks pretty bad, but we can rebuild this old dungeon.